So I thought maybe what I'd do this morning as a way of reflection is to read this sutta that Bodhipala sent me, and we can talk about that or contemplate that a little bit because it follows on nicely from what we were talking about yesterday. The name of this sutta, it comes from the Numbered Sayings, the Anguttara Nikaya Book of the Tens, and your own mind. So at one time, the Buddha was staying near Savatthi in the Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's monastery. There the Buddha addressed the mendicants. Mendicants. Venerable sir, they replied, and the Buddha said this. Mendicants, if a mendicant isn't skilled in the ways of another's mind, then they should train themselves. I will be skilled in the ways of my own mind. And how is a mendicant skilled in the ways of their own mind? Suppose there was a young man or woman, youthful and fond of adornments, and they check their own reflection in a clean, bright mirror or a clear bowl of water. If they see any dirt or blemish there, they try to remove it. But if they don't see any dirt or blemish there, they're happy with that, as they've got all that they've wished for. How fortunate that I'm clean. In the same way, checking is very helpful for a mendicant's skillful qualities. Am I often covetous or not? So, first hindrance. Am I malicious or not? Reference to the second hindrance. Am I often overcome with dullness and drowsiness or not? Third hindrance. Am I often restless or not? Am I often doubtful or not? Am I often irritable or not? Am I often corrupted in mind or not? Am I often disturbed in body or not? Am I often energetic or not? And most importantly, am I often immersed in samadhi or not? So this is just as a commentary, this is an interesting feature that we find in some of the suttas where, especially in the Anguttara, where the Buddha takes some sort of set of dhammas and then unpacks it a little bit more and adds some extra kind of qualities into a reflection there. Suppose upon checking, a mendicant knows this: I am often covetous, malicious, overcome with dullness and drowsiness, restless, doubtful, irritable, defiled in mind, disturbed in body, lazy, and not immersed in samadhi. In order to give up those bad, unskillful qualities, they should apply outstanding enthusiasm, effort, zeal, vigor, perseverance, mindfulness, and situational awareness. Suppose your clothes or head were on fire. In order to extinguish it, you would apply outstanding enthusiasm, effort, zeal, vigor, perseverance, mindfulness, and situational awareness. In the same way, in order to give up these bad, unskillful qualities, that mendicant should apply outstanding enthusiasm. But suppose that upon checking, a mendicant knows this: I am often content, kind-hearted, free of dullness and drowsiness, calm, confident, loving, pure in mind, undisturbed in body, energetic, immersed in samadhi. Grounded on those skillful qualities, they should practice meditation further to the end of defilements. So, nice little short sutta there. A few things to note, just reflecting on it. So that second means of removal of distracting thought that we were talking about yesterday, which I forget how it is that I refer to it, but the first one is you merely replace an unskillful thought with a skillful thought. And that is our top tier strategy. And if you actually look at the language of the removal of distracting thought, this notion of it being progressive in nature and application is embedded right in there. And I have it here. I can't remember what the exact language is. Let me see. If while he is examining the danger in those thoughts, there still arise. So you move from means to means. And it's like if the first means doesn't do the trick, then you move to the next strategy that we were talking about before. And here I've highlighted on the page this second strategy. It's worded a little bit differently than in the sutta I just read, but just as a man or woman, young, youthful, and fond of ornaments, would be horrified, humiliated, and disgusted if the carcass of a snake or a dog or a human being were hung around his neck. So they use quite a graphic image in this one. But the image that's used in both these teachings is interesting because it's pointing to caring for one's appearance. So in this sutta, Your Own Mind, it's like one cares if one's mind is pure or not, or sullied in some way, or defiled in some way. In this second, in the other sutta, Removal of Distracting Thoughts, it seems a little more connected even with the notion of vanity. And in conversation, sometimes people think, well, aren't we not supposed to care about the self and the whole notion of caring about our appearance or something? If everything's not self, how are we supposed to practice for the purification of mind, constellating the self in some sort of care about how it is that I appear or something in the world? But there's some faulty thinking there. You can't merely just out of faith or an act of will or something stop this kind of process of selfing. And this is a gradual path. This is a gradual process of developing the mind and purifying the mind. And there is a role for engendering a kind of care about that is akin and maybe even correctly sort of identified as a form of wholesome selfing, if you will. As you're kind of progressing on the path, you should care about the notion of living up to speaking and thinking and acting in a way that is beyond reproach or remorse, and something you can be, in a sense, proud of. There's a wholesome sense of pride, and there's also a wholesome sense of shame that are talked about in the suttas. And these can be very important reinforcing cares that one has to support their practice. And in this sutta on your own mind, caring for your mind and developing your own mind, like you should care that these defilements are present in the mind and be devoted to putting forth effort to resolve them and further the process of purification. So yeah, I notice Adil has called out hiri and ottappa, those qualities of mind in particular. So translated in different ways, but one of the components of hiri and ottappa is a sensible fear of doing something unskillful, as well as a wholesome sense of shame. That sort of feeling like you wouldn't want your teacher or some person that you respect highly to know that you're thinking this, saying this, doing this. So, and that's an important part of the motivational structure that the Buddha talks about developing as a practitioner. So, and this is the second strategy, which is interesting. So, we might be more prone to, we talked about wise reflection and kind of analyzing sort of how it is that certain defilements arise, or even a progressive approach in attention. But first is like, see if you can just change the mind. And notice, like later in the sutta, and I'll scroll down here, look at this language. This flies in the face of the notions that we should just merely be aware of defilements and tolerate them. And the suttas are full of this kind of language. The Buddha says you shouldn't tolerate these things. Sometimes you can't overcome them, and maybe patient forbearance is the best that you can do. But the general overarching advice is we should be engaged in resolving unskillful states, abandoning skillful states, replacing unskillful states with skillful ones as much as possible, and care for ourselves, our body and mind, so that we have the energy, the faith, the energy, the zeal to engage in that. And this image of the immediacy of it, like suppose your clothes are head or on fire. That's how quickly one should respond to the awareness that unskillful states of mind, hindrances in particular, should be sort of dealt with, and brought to resolve. And this is a huge part of training the mind. There's a role for patience, but you don't want to be overly patient. I mean, and this might be even more important and more true, like when we're in a period of conscious cultivation, like say a retreat period or something like that. But just in general, I mean, we're kind of trying to sort of improve the environment of our mind and our consciousness, and we're in some sort of sense trying to retrain ourselves. And there's great cumulative benefits and effort to just step by step, moment by moment, sort of developing the habits to resolve unskillful states of mind as quickly as one can and replace them with something better. And if you can't merely just change your mind and switch from a hindrance or an unskillful state of mind to a skillful one, then the second thing is caring for how it looks or appears in the mind. So, like, let's apply this to a state of anger. Like, it's easy, and I've done a lot of contemplation around this to just sensitize myself to how anger is a great stain or a toxin on the mind. And so, when anger is there, especially, say, in a form of mild irritation or something like this, it can be a little difficult to develop the resolve to figure out how to resolve that and change the mind and shift the mind into a more skillful sort of state of mind. And this second strategy sometimes is very useful if you just think of it as a stain or a blemish, something that just needs to be removed or clean, and just as anything that you care for, like your home or your appearance or your clothes or your car or your house. If you see that it's stained in some way, then there should be this natural desire to want to clean it up, and clean it up immediately is what the Buddha is saying here.